Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Stephen T started his social media journey in April of 2023 with a YouTube channel featuring himself and his 8-year-old daughter, both using a ketogenic diet for mental health. Stephen T is one of 12 people featured on Metabolic Mind's Think+Smart profiles of experts by experience, which is a resource provided by the Baszucki family. When the family first learned about ketogenic diets for treating mental illness, they relied heavily on a few critical but disparate resources. The team at Metabolic Mind believes metabolic therapies can be life changing, and they seek to fill the information gap by consolidating credible resources and real life stories from their collaborators and peers. Today, metabolic psychiatry seeks to flip treatment for mental illness on its head. Stephen T was a volunteer for the Metabolic Revolution and participated in the Parade of Proof at a rally in Washington, D.C. in 2024. He is the creator and moderator of the High Fat Beyond Optimal Facebook group and the creator and moderator of the X group, Keto Therapy for Mental Health. You can find Stephen T and his adorable daughter on his YouTube channel at Find Your Keto. Stephen T, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Oh man, what a dream come true this is. I got to tell you, Casey, because you're like an idol of mine. I've been listening to you for many years. And just to be on a podcast is a dream, but to hear someone like you, who's an idol of mine, introduce me like that, that is incredible. Thank you so much for having me.
Sheesh, man, you make me blush. Thank you for the kind words. I really love your work, and you have such an amazing story. So again, thank you so much for the kind words. I think any of us in this community, once we found carnivore diets, ketogenic diets, we just are so enthusiastic to share the message, and we try to find creative ways to do that. Right? Like yesterday, I was in the hockey locker room, and somebody was, I was chatting up a stranger, and he was a chef, and was talking about how he was serving vegans here at the Sundance Film Festival. There's a lot of people from LA, and so a lot of people on vegan. We started talking about vegan diets and what he thought about it and how ridiculous he thought it was. And we got into a story about how he ended up reversing his own type 2 diabetes several years ago, just from logic, thinking about like, okay, if I've got this disease, I can reduce sugar. So I think we always try to find little ways to get in and start conversation. And you found a really interesting way, which is your t-shirt, which ended up sparking a very interesting conversation of your own. Can you tell us, first of all, what the t-shirt is, what it says, and how it's actually helped you present this message to people?
All right, so here it is. I don't know if you can see it. It says, I like beef cuts and I cannot lie. I like beef cuts and I cannot lie. Yeah, so I wore it to a kid's birthday party last year, and one of the dads came up and made a comment, and we started talking. And the way I am is I'm out there spreading my message to everyone. So I'm explaining to him my diet. He's like, wait a minute, see, you only eat meat. He's like, I don't understand. I thought meat was bad for us. I'm eating fruits and vegetables and grains and a little bit of meat. And why do I have a gut? And I'm working out and I can't seem to lose the weight. I'm like, all right, well, try it. What do you think? You seem like the kind of guy that would try it. So like literally within like 10 days, he lost 10 pounds and he's almost full carnivore now. Him and I have become good friends, and our daughters go to school together, and they have us over the house a lot to watch football, and the girls hang out and stuff. And he's like he's amazing. I mean, he just went for it, and it was all because of the shirt.
That's awesome. What a great way to get the idea out there. Again, like yesterday, I was at my local Sam's Club, and like I have my entire shopping cart full of all the meat I'm going to eat and one set of flowers for my wife. And I'm like, is this still kind of like plant based? So we always try to sneak our message in there somewhere. You found a very creative way to do that. It's changed somebody's life, so I think that's pretty cool. Before we get into your personal story, I do have a question about your YouTube channel. I want to know why you decided to start it and why you landed on the name. I think it's a really interesting kind of play on words that I really, really like. So can you tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel?
Sure. So when it first started, my inspiration was I needed to get the message out because I had been, this started last April. So up until that point, I'd spent a year more dedicated to the ketogenic diet that I ever had and feeling the best I ever had. And people finding me on social media, mostly on Reddit, because I wasn't really much of a contributor. I was more of a consumer on social media. And so people on Reddit are reaching out to me, and I'm making friends, and I'm discovering that there's people around the world that are doing a very similar thing to me when I thought I was all alone. And I got inspired that I wanted to spread the message. And the fact that my daughter had been on a ketogenic diet for, I think, about a year at that point for her ADHD and her OCD, and that had all been improving. And I really just wanted to spread the message. And when I started, I had no idea what I was doing. So I started, the name of the channel was, which is my handle, which is MT4MH. That's Metabolic Therapy for Mental Health. That was the original name of the channel. But I realized right away that that was going to be very exclusive because there's not a lot of people that are doing this for their mental health. So at one point I was, oh man, I'm trying to remember the next. It was like Keto Basics, maybe I think was my next name, because I put together a couple of basic videos. I was going to try to teach people how to do the basics, but then I came up with the name that I'm using now, which is Find Your Keto. So while I'm a carnivore, I don't push the carnivore message. I don't really identify as a carnivore. I identify as high fat, or I call myself a lipivore. I eat a high fat diet. And I don't care if you're going to eat a high fat diet. I don't care if your fat comes from plants or it comes from animals. What I do believe is that a high fat diet and a keto diet is appropriate for everybody. And just like no two people are the same, no two keto diets are the same. And I came up with the name of the show. It's like, I want to help you find your keto. Let me help you find your keto path. So that's the name of the channel.
Yeah, I really like that. It feels like that's very inclusive, and can welcome everybody in the community. I lament the fact that on some, carnivore profiles, if I've ever posted a picture of a burger and there was a slice of an avocado there, I get so much pushback from everybody where it's like, you know what, we're kind of missing the point. We should be really a lot more supportive and accepting of everybody out there, regardless of what diet they decide to do. And so I think approaching it that way and having that name is really, really effective. So kudos to you. And the channel is wonderful. I know you said when you first got started, you didn't know what you were doing, but there's a lot of really good content on there. You share stories, personal stories. You talk with other people and have interviews, and yeah, you've done a really great job. So congratulations there.
Wow. Thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you.
Well, thank you very
Great.
much. I think you've done a great job, and yeah, you're very good at getting your message out there. But for those who don't know, let's get into your own personal story of how you got to where you got. Like we said, you were involved in the Parade of Proof last year in Washington D.C. and watching your speech that you gave in front of everybody and talking about the suffering that you went through. Like you've had a journey, my friend. How did all of that start for you?
Yeah, it's been a journey, that's for sure. So, like we said, my name is Stephen T. I'm 48 years old, and I am in remission from bipolar for about 4 years. I suffered depression and anxiety early in life. I was a victim of sexual trauma at an early age of about 8, and I have dealt with substance abuse, binge eating, anger and irritability. And my first formal treatment that I ever had was for anger management at the age of 13. And that was for things like punching holes in walls and just bashing things to pieces because I was
Oh
so
my
angry.
goodness.
All through high school, I had feelings of despair, not fitting in, feeling less than or not good enough, and wanting to unalive myself. I thought I was the only one feeling that way, but I know now from sharing my story that a lot of people also felt this way, especially in high school. So in my teens, I started smoking marijuana. And it's important to take note that marijuana is used to treat seizures because this will come up again in my story. Marijuana was the only thing that ever made me feel normal and provided some relief. And those were really the only two things I ever wanted. I just wanted to feel normal. I wanted to fit in and I wanted to have some relief from my desperate feelings. But the problem was I couldn't control it. I have no impulse control and I can't moderate drug use or really I have a hard time moderating anything that feels good. So at around the age of 22, I entered my first IOP or intensive outpatient program for substance abuse, thinking that drugs were my issue. And if I got rid of the drugs, I'd be better. So I did 6 months there, 6 months of sobriety, and I felt worse than I had ever felt before. At this point, I was told I had depression, and they started with the SSRIs, which made me feel terrible. I know a lot of people can relate to that. SSRIs are awful for me. And none of the meds or the combos of meds they were throwing at me really worked. They didn't do anything for me. So I continued to smoke pot because at least it helped me get through life. But that led to more drug use. And for years I was in and out of therapy, trying different psych meds, different combos of meds, never finding anything that works more than somewhat for some of the time. And that's a common theme for a lot of people trying psych meds. Constantly fighting against my addictions, and there was tobacco and alcohol, and like I said, marijuana, basically you name it. Besides sticking a needle in my arm, whatever it is out there, I tried it. But I always had a constant urge to do the right thing. I wanted to stop using drugs. And in my mid 20s, I got heavily involved in AA. I had sponsor and sponsees and meet a bunch of the young guys in AA. We started our own home group and we had a midnight meeting that was down by the beach. And during the summer, we would do our midnight meetings on the beach. It was a really cool time of my life. But again, after another 6 month stretch of sobriety, I was just extremely angry and irritable. And I wanted to unalive myself every minute of every day. I was just filled with rage. So at around 26, I enter my second IOP. Now I get a dual diagnosis. They say, along with substance abuse, I have bipolar 2 mixed, and they prescribe a mood stabilizer for the first time. I was already taking Wellbutrin and Effexor, and they added Lamictal, which is an anti-seizure drug. Keep that note. I was also told that bipolar is a lifelong disease. You're going to have to take mood stabilizers for the rest of your life, which is a very disheartening message because knowing my prior experience with meds was not a good one. Here I am thinking I'm facing this lifelong battle that there's no way I can win this battle. And that's just a terrible feeling. And it's a terrible message that I hope is going to change at some point.
Yeah, I totally agree. Wow, what a story. With any of the treatment programs, did you feel like you got any relief by going to them? At any point, did they feel like they were doing anything for you, or were they completely just not helpful for you?
No, absolutely. There was some help because the times that I was getting in these programs, I was in an emergent situation. My life was like falling apart. And I have found for myself just the consistency of going to therapy, even if the therapy itself is not all that effective, just showing up every week, or in the case of the IOPs, I'm doing 3 to 5 days a week. Just being there can help you turn around. And if I'm in a vicious cycle going downward, now I can kind of turn that cycle around and start to go back upward. So it was all beneficial in some way. Yes, definitely.
I see. Okay. Thanks for elaborating there. And then your experience on the medications. I assume it was a lot of side effects. You often hear tons of side effects with psych meds. Really challenging as far as like the combinations, like you said, like getting prescribed something, deprescribed, mixed with something. Like there just seems to be so many interactions. It sounds like that was a not great experience for you.
No, absolutely. And there are times where, like I said, I'm in an emergent situation. I just want to unalive myself every single day. And I feel like I can't even make it through the day. And then I start taking a med and maybe I feel a little bit better for a couple of weeks. So okay, it helped me. But then the side effects start to kick in. And like with the case of the SSRIs, they just make me feel terrible. There's sexual dysfunction, there's appetite dysregulation, and there's so many things that go along with the SSRIs for me. That's like after a couple of weeks, I don't want to have anything to do with that anymore.
Yeah. Wow. What was it like to get that diagnosis of bipolar? Was that in any way like informative? Did that help you and have a sense of moving forward, or like you kind of alluded to, like knowing that you would now be on medication supposedly for the rest of your life? That also has to be, not very hopeful.
I remember the moments that they were telling me because as they were telling me, I'm like, well, this is it. Okay, I know what's wrong with me. It felt like a relief to know this is what's wrong with me. Let's fix it. But then a couple sentences later, it's like, well, this is a lifelong thing, and the best you can do is take this pill. And so, like I said, it was very disheartening, and just the feeling of a battle I'm facing that I feel like I have no way of winning. That's very difficult for me to accept.
It's not very empowering for sure. Like it's just the doctor telling you this is happening to you versus like there's something you can do about this.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's continue on the story.
Okay.
Once you got the, kind of put on the mood stabilizer, did that seem to help anything? Like, how did that journey go?
Yeah, Lamictal as a mood stabilizer, being an anti-seizure med, yeah, it worked pretty well, I would say, somewhat. I never felt great on it. And like if I was ever in an emergent situation and I took it, I would feel better. But I had never felt great. It's just not possible for me to feel great on something like that. It's like roughly from my mid 20s to my mid 40s, I'm on a combo of meds, usually with Lamictal added in. And sometimes I'm going a year or two without, and then I come back to it. Um, on the outside, yeah, I seemed okay. But nobody knows how much I'm suffering on the inside. And those who know me well, or people that deal with me every day, like my coworkers, there's a running joke that there's more than one Steven. And some are say that there's like 3 or 4 different personalities. Some would say that there's even more. That's people that are seeing me every day. But just people from the outside, like family and friends that are not that close, they don't know that I'm suffering as much. During this 20-year stretch, I am trying everything I can to find relief that's not destroying myself. And so I'm vegetarian that whole time. I'm vegan towards the end. I was even a raw vegan, and nothing really works. So I continue to smoke pot because it at least makes me feel okay. I can get through the day. But now in my early 40s, I end up 50 pounds overweight. I'm pre-diabetic. I have terrible skin, terrible mood. And even with a great job and a great wife and a 2-year old at home, I'm miserable and I don't want to live. And there's just no explanation for the way I felt. So, what I initially did was I lowered my carbs to lose some weight. And this I remembered from doing what's called a carb backload plan. This was when I was powerlifting years prior. I remember that when I lowered my carbs, I felt better. It helped me moderate my weight. So it was pretty easy at the time. We were trying to raise a child on one salary, so I was eating as cheaply as possible. So I was eating a ton of pasta, a ton of bread. I had been doing sourdough for a couple of years, and I was eating bread and pasta every day. So I dropped that, and I lost 20 pounds in just over 2 weeks. My skin started to feel better. I was happier, but I attributed it all to just losing weight. And around this time, I started getting into listening to podcasts, and I hear Vinny Tortorich, and he mentions this thing called the carnivore diet. And I thought it was the most ridiculous thing I had ever heard in my life. Like, I was already eating meat at this point, but I'm like, how could anyone eat only meat? In my mind, I'm picturing like the same boring steak every day. And how could anybody do that? But the idea always stuck in my mind because it's a very extreme idea. And I'm an extreme kind of guy. It's my kind of idea. And so over the next couple of months, I noticed that the less carbs I ate and the more meat I ate, the better I felt. My skin was clearing up and I wasn't depressed anymore. And my mood was a lot more stable too. And within like maybe 6 or 9 months, I was already eating only meat and I was already getting fat from my butcher because I realized that just eating meat is not enough for me. You got to have, I was eating very lean meat. You got to have fat in your diet, and you can only get so much from liquid fats like butter and tallow. So people ask a lot, how can I stomach the amount of fat I eat? Because they're seeing my meals on socials or they're hearing me talk about it. Because I can eat over a pound of raw beef fat in one sitting. And I want people to realize that this is like 6 years now. I've been eating a lot of fat for a very long time. And I started slow and I took it easy. And I had plenty of issues with stomach distress. And I've had the dreaded fountain coming out of my backside. And I'm still not immune to that. It still does happen at times, but I do not care because a high fat diet is going to allow me to be the person I've always dreamt of.
Yeah.
Right. So in my story, I'm eating meat only, lots of beef fat, and I find ketosis by accident. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that it was the best I ever felt. I was calm and happy, and I was excited for life. And then it was my subsequent research that led me to the keto diet used for epilepsy to treat seizures. This is when I had my giant light bulb moment because the only things that ever work for me are anti-seizure treatments. It was the marijuana, the Lamictal, and the keto diet. Now, I've never had a seizure, and I've never had a doctor or anybody mention epilepsy to me, but I did discover very recently that my grandfather was epileptic. He did have seizures. And oh, by the way, he also used to flip out in anger and break things just like me.
Wow. Fascinating. Do you know if he ever came across the research about diet because it was around back then? He never did.
No.
Wow, that's fascinating. What was it like to start to learn that? Like you had kind of discovered, the ketogenic diet in almost the opposite way that everybody else discovers it. You discovered carnivore first and then learned about keto and then learned that like this can actually help you with, your mental state. Obviously, you were noticing the changes yourself, but what was it like to stumble upon the research?
It was profound. It was really a profound moment in my life. And this is going back several years now. But to me, I felt like this is it. I finally found my answer. Maybe I'm bipolar. Maybe there's like epilepsy, even though I don't have seizures. I don't even care what's going on inside of me. This is the way that I can fix it. And I have control now of my life. That's how I felt was I have control of my treatment and the kind of life that I'm going to live.
That's amazing. It must be so empowering, like we mentioned earlier, that you have that control. What kinds of reservations did you have about starting a carnivore diet, especially learning along the way that you had to be higher fat in that journey?
No, I didn't have any reservations.
None.
I heard Vinny Tortorich talking about the carnivore diet, but then like it wasn't a big thing back then. We're talking 2019, 2020, and I'm not really on social media that much, so you're not seeing a lot of people talking about it. And it wasn't like I woke up one day and like I'm just going to try carnivore tomorrow. It gradually happened over a couple of months, and I followed my body. I listened to how well I felt, and that was enough for me. I knew that, like I said, eating more meat and eating less carbs, I felt better. So I just followed that path.
Wow. What about the medications? Did you end up being able to kind of get off of the medications that you were on?
I wasn't on them at the time.
I see. I see. So you had already been prescribed, or you had just stopped taking them yourself?
I just stopped taking them. That's part of my cycle. It's like I go maybe a couple years with them, and then I go a couple years without. Like over 20 years or so, that's how it was. And this was a period of my time where I was off them.
I mean, they say that's a big no-no. Did you experience any like noticeable side effects or effects from alternating on and off some of those meds?
It's hard to say. It's hard to differentiate where maybe my bipolar was coming in and the ups and downs, or being on and off meds. But it's like the story I told is that I'm in an emergent situation. My life is a mess. I take Lamictal. A couple months later, I feel better. I've got myself back on track. Now I'm eating better. Maybe I'm exercising again. And then I start to experience the side effects. And now the side effects are stronger than the benefits I was getting. So I want to stop taking it. And that's what I
Gotcha.
do.
Yeah,
So
gotcha.
that's kind of my
Obviously,
story.
we're not condoning doing that, and you should do that with a medical professional. But it's interesting
Right.
because you hear of people that do it, and again, it's not recommended, but it is done. People do it, so that's kind of interesting there. Tell us how your personal story with diet intersected also with the story of your family, in particular your daughter.
Okay, so she was like 2.5 at the time or something when I changed my diet, and we knew at as early of an age at like 3.5 with her that maybe there was something wrong with her that we needed to investigate. We had signs in preschool, and so it took us a long time. There's a lot of kids that are really suffering out there, and in order for us to see a neuropsychologist and get a diagnosis and all, it took a long time. And in that time, we she's already on a really very decent diet because at this point I'm believing that I want her to eat as much meat as possible and not eat all the junk. So she's never even had at that point like never had fruit juice and didn't eat candy and stuff like that. But when it comes time for treatment, we're told by the doctors that it's medicine only. They're not even talking about diet for adults. They're not going to talk about it for kids. So my wife felt very strongly about following that path. I felt very strongly about trying diet first. So we compromised. We started trying her on some medications, but we also started a low carb diet. It wasn't ketogenic, but it was low carb, and it didn't go well. Her experience with medications was much like mine and much like others, where it didn't work very well for her. And then we got to a point where our neuropsychologist wanted to put my she was probably 6 at the time on SSRIs. I'm like, I'm sorry, there's absolutely no way we're doing that. Regardless of my experience with SSRIs, I'm not messing with a 6-year-old's brain that way. I'm just not doing it. I
Wow.
don't. And my wife agreed. So this is when we started ketogenic diet for her. This was it's hard to keep track of time now, but it was like a year and a half ago, I guess, something like that, or maybe it was 2.5. I don't know. But we started on a ketogenic diet, and we saw improvements right away, and we continue to see improvements with her. And the times that she's had parties and treats and snacks and vacations and gone off of it a little bit, we do see symptoms come back. And with her, it comes out a lot with her OCD. Unfortunately, that's what she struggles with the most.
I see. Interesting. Was it difficult to convince your wife that diet could be a major culprit and something that you could change with her?
It was, but it was my fault that it was hard to convince her because over the years, I'm not sticking to my diet the way I should. And this is one of the things I like to share about is that it's not like um, it's not like I can just wipe my hands. Like I have to continue to work and I have to do things a certain way. So I'm trying to tell her like, well, look what the diet does for me. But she sees me every couple of weeks and I'm angry and I'm irritable and I'm snapping at her and I'm not doing it the way I'm supposed to. So I'm not really a good advertisement for what diet can do. Right. It was at the point that our neuropsychologist was just like, well, I don't know what to tell you. She's a tough case and really you're out of options. So at that point, it was like, okay. And my wife's like, okay, so let's try the ketogenic diet and see what happens.
Mm. Wow. You and I had a call the other day where we just kind of chatted up a little bit and we talked about that fact. Like we all just kind of assume that once somebody finds a ketogenic diet, a carnivore diet, they solve a major health issue like you did, that everything is just kind of like done. Like you figured it out, you sorted it out, you know what you need to do. The punishment of going off the plan is so great that you're never really going to do it. But we forget that like food is really delicious. Like sourdough bread is very delicious. I told you, you know, my wife and I just got back from a vacation, and typically I'll be like 99% on what I do at home. We cooked a lot in our Airbnb, and burger patties and that kind of stuff was great. One day I went out and I had a burrito and had some chips and salsa, and it was like it wasn't the worst. My digestion wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. It's very rare that I do that kind of thing, and I thought it would punish me, and it wasn't the best. I didn't sleep the best and that kind of thing. But like the cravings are real, and it would be so easy for me to slip right back. Like the next day, bullshit just sounded really good. Like a candy bar sounded really good. Taco time, Taco Bell sounded really good. Like stupid little things sound good that are fine. It's just really inconvenient. And like it's such a relief to get back home and get back on the foods that make you feel good. It just, yeah, it's interesting that like you feel like once you find it, you're never going to deviate, but it's still that tempting that people deviate.
Yeah, this is a perfect chance for me to talk all about this because I think it's important for people to know that I am not perfect. I'm not some robot, and life happens. And yeah, I mess up and I fall down. And anybody follow me on social media will see that I'm an open book and I'm transparent, and I ate Halloween candy and then I did not have a good fall. Winters are always tough for me. The days get shorter and it's cold and depression always sets in. Now, the past couple of years that I've been more dedicated to the keto diet, it becomes less and less of an effect. But yeah, I still slipped up this year and I ate things that I shouldn't. But the key here is that I want people to know that even though I fall down, I will never stay down. I will always get back up and I will always keep working. Right? I will never consider myself as having reached the destination. Like I just woke up today and like, hey, I'm in keto heaven and that's it. I made it. I'm here. It's never going to be that way. I must always put in the work that's required to retain my mental health. And I'll always consider myself traveling along the road of wellness, always trying, always improving. Actually, I have a bracelet on that my daughter gave me. It's in my orange color for my theme show. And that's what it says. It says, always trying, always improving. I am
Mm.
always looking to learn, always looking to try new things. And I will always be on a path of self love and self care because just want to keep improving and I want to manage all life throws at me and try to be the best version of myself.
Yeah, I love that. What a great lesson. It's so cool that you carry that with you with that band all the time. I think that's a wonderful lesson. And I really appreciate the authenticity. It's very genuine that you put that message out there. And I think that helps people out there who feel like they need to be perfect. And if they're not perfect, they're not accepted in the community or they're really screwing things up. So I really, really appreciate that. And again, it's so important to note that like the punishment of you going off the diet is so great. And it's still that hard to stay perfect on the diet all the time. So, yeah, I really like that. I'm glad you shared that. What I want to know, I'm always curious about this because it's one thing when you want to change your own diet, you're doing it for your own purposes. You have a family, you've got a wife and a child. How was it, practically speaking, to get them to change their diet? Was that terribly difficult? Did you just change the foods that you brought into the home? Was there a lot of consternation and weeping and wailing and gnashing of the teeth? Like, how did that go?
That's good questions. So first of all, I want to specify that my wife is not keto, not yet. I keep trying. She will be eventually one day, but she's on her own path and she's got to travel her journey to get there. So it's just my kid that we're doing it for. Now, my wife she does her own thing. She's most of the time gluten free, dairy free, and we've always avoided seed oils as long as I've known how bad they are. And initially, I would say it was kind of easy. I find that kids are flexible. At least my kid is pretty flexible. But we had already been doing a lower carb approach for a while. And then when we needed to get her ketogenic, it wasn't that far of a stretch to get her there. And there may have been a couple of days where she's crying because she can't have this or that, but she adjusts in a couple of days. And we have always, since the beginning, we allow her to have treats and we build it all in. I use the app Chronometer to track her food and to track mine. And, you know, our society and the way we live our lives, it's all associated with food. So all year long, they're bombarded with parties and they're bombarded with treats and snacks and birthdays and all this stuff. So we allow her to have her treats and she works really well with us. And that's part of it is that she's involved in the process. She knows that we're trying to keep her fat at a certain percent, and she'll come up to me and she'll be like, "Hey, can I have this? Will it fit my numbers?" And we we work really well together. And the best part was when we first transitioned, we started to see improvements. So it made it easier on everybody. She started to feel better. We started to feel like we were doing the right thing. So that makes the whole thing so much easier.
Yeah. Okay. So I've talked to so many parents at this point and asked questions about the transition with their kiddos. And I have to say, I don't have kids, so I don't understand exactly how difficult it is. But what I've gathered from most parents who've gone through this journey is like if there's a transition period, it's pretty short. And I don't think the kids hate it. Like it doesn't sound like they're suffering mightily by eating these foods. And I often wonder, and I'd ask you the same question, like growing up, if you had been given the same thing and been told like, hey, like if you eat mostly meat and you get rid of the cereal and all this, garbage that you're eating between periods and falling asleep during class, and like you could perform a lot better in sports or you'd look a lot more jacked and maybe get more dates. Like, don't you wonder like if you would have been just totally fine kind of following this stuff as well? Or that, like most kids, if they're exposed to this, like really don't hate it as much as you would think.
No, absolutely. For me, I would have done everything I could, and especially if I had seen some relief from the way I was feeling from my diet, then absolutely. My first experience with what I eat and how I feel or what it does to my body was when I was like 18 and a friend's mom was trying to help me figure out why I had terrible, terrible acne. And I was very skinny at the time, trying to gain weight. And I was drinking a ton of milk. And she's like, all right, well, why don't you try dropping the milk and come back to me? So like in a couple of weeks, I dropped the milk and my skin's getting better. I'm like, I had no idea that food really, food affects us this way. I had no idea. She gave me a book to read, Diet for a New America. That's why I initially became a vegetarian. I read that book and that was my first connection into how food affects us. And ever since, really since 18, like I read ingredients on everything. And that really started my whole interest with how food affects us.
Wow, that's a great example. Like, if you told 16-year-old me that all I would have to do is give up milk and I wouldn't have acne, which was terribly embarrassing in high school anyway, like that would have been a pretty easy trade. I wouldn't have missed that at all. So, yeah, that's a really good point. I'm glad you shared that anecdote. And I'm curious if you could share specifically when you're talking about your daughter and different symptoms. What are we talking? Like, what is her behavior normally like? When she's on the ketogenic diet, she's been on it for a while, everything's fine, versus the day or so after a party or something where she deviates. Like, what are the differences in the specific symptoms that you notice?
Okay, so for her, her biggest thing is her OCD, and it's not the type of OCD where you've got to shut the light switch off 7 times, leave, or you shut the stove off and you leave the house and you come back, you got to make sure it's off. It's not that. It's more placement of items, and she'll have items placed in a certain way, and if they're moved slightly, or if she even thinks they're moved slightly, she can freak out from that. And she's a lot like me in that she has anger and she'll yell and scream and she'll snap just like I do. And so we've been going to this OCD therapy for her. It's called NoCD. They're amazing, and we're teaching her that it's her OCD monster. That's this voice inside of her, and when we're doing things right and things are good, the monster is more quiet. But then when we go off, or she has treats or things like that, the voice gets louder, and now all of a sudden it literally it's like the same day or the next day. All of a sudden, now she's freaking out because things got moved or we're not doing things in a particular order, that kind of thing.
I see. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. It helps to kind of get that perspective. You mentioned something earlier. We talked about this over the phone the other day. I don't know that we've ever covered this topic on the podcast, but you mentioned that you have been eating certain animal foods raw. Can you tell us your journey into raw foods? Obviously, that started with raw veganism, which is, I would say, not a great idea, but I understand why people do it. How did that transition again from going carnivore to starting to play with doing raw foods? I'm very curious about that.
I'm laughing. I'm like, all right, here we go. Let's talk about the raw
Here we
stuff.
go.
So the raw vegan thing was Brendan Brazier. He was a Ironman triathlete. I read his book, and he was raw vegan. At the time, I'm searching for solutions, and I'm already vegan. But I'm like, this is it. This is what I'm missing. I'm cooking my food. I need to go raw vegan. But I just got worse when I did that. So when I first started eating meat like 6 years ago, well, I started eating meat a couple years prior to that, but I always liked all my meat well done. When I started eating only meat, it was about 6 years ago. My meat was always very, very, very well done, like really, really dead,
Oof,
really.
oof.
But that's how I liked it. I didn't know any better. But over time, I started to cook it less and less, and I got into sous vide cooking. You're familiar with the sous vide?
I
Okay.
use it every day.
Oh, perfect. So I don't use it as much anymore because I'm not really cooking that much. But
Yeah.
with sous vide, you can still have a fully cooked steak or some fully cooked fat, but it comes out and it's very pink on the inside. It's much more like a raw steak. And I really enjoyed that. And in the beginning, I was doing the cast iron and doing the sear and all that. I'm like, I don't know why I'm even doing the sear. It's just a waste of time. I got all this mess to clean up and everything. So I stopped doing the sear. And over time, I'm really enjoying that. And the times that I'm cooking my food in a pan, it's getting less and less. If I put a steak on the grill, it's less and less. I'm liking it more rare. And then there's a couple of times where I'm really hungry. As I'm cooking my food, I take a couple of bites of raw meat, raw fat, and I just notice like, oh, I really like this. I enjoy it. It feels good. So I'm like gonna kind of experiment with that, but like it's ingrained in us that we need to cook everything because of bacteria and we're gonna get sick and all that. So I'm not just gonna like I wasn't just gonna jump into raw. Now I didn't realize that there's a whole community on social media doing this because I wasn't really on socials that strong at the time. But I noticed specifically right away that I really enjoyed my beef fat raw. Now I'm getting all my beef fat from the butcher when prime rib goes on sale for the holidays. I have a very good relationship with my butchers. So all my fat is coming from prime rib. It's very high quality. It's the best you can get and it's delicious and I love it. So I started eating my beef fat raw months before I went like 90% raw. And I hadn't been cooking my fat anymore because I just didn't enjoy it. So I'm like, well, why am I doing that? I'm loving it. I don't enjoy it cooked. This is what I like to do. I try to follow my body. I'm listening to the signals that are coming. And I don't know, I guess like last spring sometime, and I'm eating my fat raw, but I'm still searing my meat. And I'm asking myself, one of the things I've learned to do over the years is just to question everything. Why am I even searing my steak? What am I doing that for? Sometimes it's only like a couple of seconds on each side. Like it's pleasing some part of me that thinks, well, if you don't do this, you're going to get sick. It's like, you better be careful. But I'm like, why am I doing that? So I stopped doing it. And so this is what I like to do now is I like to experiment. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to do 2 weeks of fully raw and then I'm going to go barbecue a steak and see. So I do the 2 weeks and I love it. So I find it so far superior to cooking all my food that my digestion is better. I go from feeling hungry to no longer feeling hungry. So for someone like me or anybody who's got addiction or food addiction that I can't regulate my food intake, I say that I don't have an off switch. I could just eat and eat and eat, and I can get to the point where I'm going to be physically ill. And 10 minutes later, I'm going to want to eat again. So what I found is that it's more satiating. My digestion is perfect. So I did the first 2 weeks and then I went and had a steak on the grill. And I, like I had this idea in my head, like I was kind of fantasizing about it, but it tasted good, but it really wasn't all that good. I ended up eating more than I normally would. And then what I noticed was later on is that, oh, I burped a couple of times, which I thought was weird. The next day I have a little bit of gas. I'm like, wait a minute, it's still just steaks I'm eating. You telling me because I went from raw to cooked that like I'm having a little bit of digestive issues from it? And that's what it was. I tested it a couple times and I just find that eating raw is so far superior to anything else. And that's why I'm following that. I'm looking for like optimal, right? That's what I want. I want to be as optimal as possible. But I also want to do what I enjoy. If I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't do it. It's very important to me that I enjoy what I'm doing in my life. I feel that's important for anybody because otherwise, what's the point, you know? So
That's a really good point.
I would
You
say,
hear go ahead, sorry.
no, I was going to say, I'm not fully raw. I'm like 90 or 99% raw. Most of my food is raw, but I still do like steaks on the grill. I have a really nice Weber grill that was gifted to us for our wedding anniversary that just makes the steak so delicious. And I will take big strips of prime rib beef fat. Sometimes they have the meat still in them and I'll grill those. So I do that. My daughter really appreciates when we eat together and she's not really as big on beef as I am. So she likes chicken and pork. So I'll barbecue. We did chicken drumsticks recently. We'll get a rotisserie chicken at the store. I did pork spare ribs recently. I'm not eating any of that stuff raw. I'm not interested in pork or chicken or any of that because that just grosses me out. I'm not doing that. So I do eat some cooked meats, but while it's not going to tank my mood, it's not optimal, especially when I eat chicken and pork. I have a lot of gas. I'm burping. I have a lot of gas for a couple of days. It's not comfortable, but I enjoy the food and I enjoy the bonding with my daughter. So I continue to do that at times, maybe once a week or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds absolutely worth it. And I feel the same. And I think a lot of people, when they find a carnivore diet, they realize that if they are doing a lot of pork, chicken, or other things, in anything that's more than like meat condiments essentially to the red meat, I think they notice they don't feel as optimal as well, or they're still very hungry. It's just not the same like nutrient quality. So I really appreciate that. We have to ask. You've already brought this up. Like the number one concern most people would have for raw beef is that the bacteria, you're going to get sick, whatever. How do you explain that to people that it's a little bit different when it comes to beef and the whole bacteria thing? As far as that goes, maybe a little bit overblown.
I don't know if I'm the guy to deliver that message, you know? Um, it's not like I'm going down the street to my local farmer and I'm getting grass finished meat from some guy that I can trust and I've seen the cow and all that. I'm just going to the supermarket and I'm getting conventionally raised grain finished beef, you know, and majority of it has been frozen for a while. And I've seen some people say that that can help kill some of the bacteria. Um, I just for myself, I don't worry about it. Like
Cool.
it was a very slow transition, and I often wonder, is it possible that I just have very strong stomach acid at this point because I've been eating so much meat for so long, and it was a slow transition into the raw. And like I said, I had been doing the raw beef fat for a while. I just don't worry about it.
Cool. Oh, that's great. I love that you're seeking for your own health what is optimal, and willing to play around and kind of get there and not really worry about what other people say or what other people's experience is, only what yours is. So I really do appreciate that. Another thing that you include in your diet, which is, I wouldn't say controversial, but some people find success with this, other people don't, is a lot of different organ meats, including, I've heard you say recently that you also eat brain, which I don't even know where you get that or how you're able to consume that. But can you tell us, on your quest for finding optimal, how organ meats have fit into that journey?
So part of it is from trying to find acceptance with the fact that ruminant animals is really the only thing I don't react to. I pretty much react to everything I eat. I could consume coconut if I want, but I don't really love coconut that much. Pretty much everything else out there I react to. And this comes from years of self experimentation and doing beef only for a while, adding things back in. So over the years, it's been very difficult to accept that. I'm gaining more and more acceptance with it. It doesn't bother me anymore. But there was a time where it's like, okay, in my style, this is how I do things. If all I'm going to eat is cows, well, I'm going to find as much of the cow as possible. So I find online retailers like US Wellness Meats, that's grassland beef, and I get adrenals and thyroid and spleen and all this stuff. And a lot of it is pretty nasty. I didn't like it, right? The first time I had the adrenals, I didn't know you're only supposed to have a tiny piece. I had like 2 or 3 adrenals and I was literally throwing up like within an hour. I didn't know what was
Oh
going
my
on.
goodness.
But you're not supposed to do that. I just didn't know. So it was my quest to source as much of the animal as possible. And then over time, I just kept the things that I like the best or the things that I have easy access to. So the brain, it's veal brains. I get it from a local butcher. One of the things I like about it is that it's high in fat. So it fits my macros very well. Um, I can't say that I notice any benefits really from it. I just enjoy it. It's like the texture of scrambled eggs. If you cook it, like when I first started having brains, I would cook it, and it's very much like scrambled eggs. And the cool thing about scrambled eggs is you can hide a lot of fat in it. You could put a ton of tallow and butter. It's just going to soak it all up. So brains will do the same thing. Now that I'm eating it raw, it's coming out of the freezer, and I usually don't even defrost it, so it's almost like eating an ice pop. I thought about actually putting it. We make pops for my daughter, and I thought about putting it in a pop mold with a stick and just I don't know, that would be kind of weird, but um, the liver and also heart. I do like heart because I can get it cheaply because nobody around here wants it, I guess. So I can get it at a good price. Liver, I've had a long journey with liver. The very first time I tried it, I was at work. I remember this, and I gagged and I almost threw up from it. It was awful. But at the time, I was listening to Saladino when he was still a carnivore, and he was really pushing the liver and the organs. Little did I know that shortly after that, he's going to be coming out with a desiccated organ company, and that's who knows if that's why he's pushing them out. So anyway,
Right.
I thought I needed liver as a carnivore, so I was forcing myself to eat it, and I got to a point where I didn't want it anymore, and then I stopped. But this is another example of me listening to my body. So I will crave liver from time to time, and it's it's consistent with say I do a heavy barbell session, and the next day I'm sore and I'm hungry. I'm like, oh, I want to have some liver, and I go have the liver, and I have it portioned out in 50-gram bags, frozen in the freezer, and when I'm craving it like that, it will literally taste sweet. It's delicious. I love it. And I'll have the 50 grams. And sometimes that's not enough. I may go grab another bag, or maybe the next day I'm still craving it. So I may have some more. And sometimes what'll happen is it starts to taste metallic. And as soon as I get that off metallic taste, I'm like, nope, I had enough. I put it away. It might be once a week sometimes. It might be once a month sometimes. It's just like whenever the thought comes up and I feel like I want it, and then I kind of gauge it on my taste, I throw it back in.
Great. Yeah, I think that's awesome. How are you? You mentioned 50 grams. Is that cut up into like little pieces that are frozen? Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, so this is one of the ways that I try to manage my food intake, because I've said I don't have an off switch. And I often wonder if it's from the many years of smoking marijuana, which stimulates your appetite. And there were other psych meds I took, like Remron, that stimulated my appetite. Something happened to me that I just don't have an off switch. So, and I also I've been trying hard to treat my food like literally like medicine. So if I was taking Lamictal, I'm going to have a bottle with pills, and they're going to be 150 milligrams, right? So with my food, I have my fat bags. They're 100 grams. I have, or maybe they're 200, depending on which bag I'm in. I have meat cut up. It's all cut up into large bite-sized pieces. Meat bags are 100 grams. The liver and the brains are both 50 grams each. So I can look at my app and say, okay, what's my prescription for today? It's 200 of fat, 100 of meat, and a liver. I go down in the freezer, I grab them, and that's my food for the day.
Yeah. Wow. Well done. I really like that. And I love the approach of being intuitive and going by the taste of things. I think that's the best way to be able to do that and understand that, yeah, it might be once a month. It might be once every other month. It might be weekly that you're craving it. But I think that is the true definition of intuitive eating, is eating the things that fit, within your carnivore-ish style diet, find your keto diet, whatever, that, you can kind of play around with that and decide what sounds good for the day. And you did mention weightlifting. I wanted to be sure that we talked about other lifestyle factors that you also push into. It's interesting once you get into this world that, people find diet. And I think that is one of the biggest culprits that you can find, that really, if you can, push that button and pull that lever, you get a lot of other wins in other places. But you also notice that, before long, people are thinking about sunlight. They're walking around barefoot in their neighborhood without a shirt on. There's just all kinds of different things that we do in this practice. So tell us about some of the other practices that you have found that also help you continue to optimize your life and lifestyle.
So there's so much to talk about here. I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. Chris Palmer, right?
Yeah, for sure. Brain energy, out there, brain energy.
So anybody who's not familiar should get his book, Brain Energy, because his brain energy theory bases mental and physical health on mitochondria. And then I had Hannah Warren as a guest. She's also been a guest of yours. And I love Hannah. She's awesome. She
Awesome.
put she put it well. She said that when it comes to mitochondria, that we're talking about the quality and the quantity of them. So as far as quality, they don't process energy correctly, and that's why switching from burning sugar to fat works so well. And as far as quantity, we have too few. So for those of us that are suffering mental health, especially, we don't have enough mitochondria, and they're not working very well. So I have all these metabolic strategies that I'll get into in a sec. It's a holistic approach, and the bottom line is I'm trying to target my mitochondria. I want to multiply and strengthen my mitochondria as much as possible. So I want my mitochondria to be muscular. I want my mitochondria to be like, yeah, like flexing. You know what I mean? I want them to be strong, and I want there to be lots of them. So I'm doing things like fasting, and that's a long journey for me too. I eat typically once a day, so I'm fasting anywhere from 20 to 26 hours a day. And then for the past couple of months, I've been fasting at least one day a week. I have a couple of friends in a Discord group that we all love each other. We get along very well. And we sometimes we fast together on Sundays. We do challenges together. And then other times I do longer fasts. Sometimes I do that 24 on a Sunday. And on Monday, I'm just not that hungry, and it turns into a 96. And over the fall, I started throwing in some dry fasting here or there. Anybody who follows me on socials, you'll see that in order to correct myself from screwing up on the holidays, I went on a 7-day fast. The first 5 days were dry. That's just something I love. And again, I'm not really the guy to deliver the message about the science, but there's autophagy and mitophagy and all these things that happen when you fast. And I have noticed that my healing is like supercharged. If there's a cold in the house and I feel like maybe I got a sore throat coming on, I fast for the day. I'm better the next day. If I have, like, I had a cut on my thumb that was bothering me, It split from the cold, and I fasted on Sunday. I woke up Monday morning. It's like, wow, that healed a lot overnight. I noticed that a lot. And my analogy for fasting is like I liken it to a car, and fasting is like a car wash for your car. So my car is not stored in the garage. This is my brain I'm talking about. It's getting rained on and it's baking in the sun all day. It's getting bird poop. And if you just leave that, it's just going to build up and your car's going to look disgusting. But if you wash it every week, it's going to look pretty good, right? It's not going to be perfect. So that's why I like doing the once a week fasting. I feel like it's like a car wash for my brain.
Yeah. It's challenging in the beginning, especially if you're not used to it. Like as part of the religion that I was brought up in, we had to fast one time a month for 24 hours, and it was like the worst day of the entire month by far. But you start to realize like, when you're eating really satiating foods, you're just not interested in food that much. Fasting becomes really quite effortless to begin with, and the way you're describing is like 96 hours or 1 week. Like if hunger were linear and you just got hungrier and hungrier the deeper you got into the fast, it would just be worse and worse and worse every single day. And I noticed a pattern of like pretty much it's the second day that most people feel the hungriest, and then that hunger drops out, and it almost doesn't seem to matter whether you go 3 days or 5 days or 7 days after that. You'll experience little waves of hunger, but it's really nothing that challenging. And it seems like a pretty easy thing to continue to stay on as far as the fasting goes.
Yeah, it's not true hunger. I feel like fasting allows me to strengthen my internal radar for things and how I'm feeling. It's not true hunger. I may have some true hunger on that first day, but I've learned that I get my hunger signals at certain times of the day, and I get my strongest one probably 10:30 to 11 o'clock in the morning. And if I can drink a glass of water and wait a half hour and it goes away, then I'm good. There are days where, like, I've tried to fast plenty of times where, like, okay, I'm going to do a 48, and I get 24 hours in. I'm like, no, I need to eat. I just know the difference. So what I do for myself is, this is a good gauge for me, is I will picture a pile of raw beef fat. And what does that do to me physically? Does it make my mouth water? Does it make my stomach rumble? And do I feel like, oh man, I got to have that? Or is it like, I do not want raw beef fat right now? If I feel that way, then that's not real hunger. That's just my physiological thing, my hormones cycling throughout the day. And like when I did the 7 day fast, which was my longest, people are blown away. It's very polarizing, the dry fasting thing. I didn't know that. It's very, very polar because people are like, no, you can't go 3 days without water. You'll die. Like, okay, well, I mean, what I did was chump change. The people in the dry fasting club online, they're doing 11, 15 days, 21 days dry. Now, these
Yep.
are people with, most of them they have very serious health conditions they're trying to heal. And that's why they're doing it. And they're also doing what's called hard dry fasting, where they have no contact with water whatsoever. So they're not washing their hands and not brushing their teeth. Me, I was still washing my hands. That's one thing I'm going to do that because I'm still preparing food for my kid. And just throughout the day, I want to wash my hands. I did have a couple of days where I wasn't brushing my teeth every time because, like, after a couple of days of no food and no water, there's like no bacteria in your mouth. It doesn't really matter anyway. But
Mm.
I found on my fifth day was my best day of that fast. I woke up on the fifth day feeling amazing. I had clarity and energy. I felt like I could lift weights and run sprints and do all the things I do now. I didn't do any of that stuff, but I felt like I could. And I had that same energy intensity from the minute I woke up to the minute I went to bed. It was amazing.
Wow. Well, and I mean, we're having this conversation today in part because I found low carbohydrate diets through using metabolic carts. And when people started doing, fasting got a little bit more popular, when keto was getting popular, 2018, 2019, I would be measuring the metabolic rate of people that were doing fasting. And unlike somebody who had done chronic dieting, who had specifically ate less calories, they would have suppressed metabolic rates. Their metabolism, their bodies just weren't burning very many calories relative to where they should have been based on their demographic. And I saw the opposite effect of people doing fasting. It's like they were also not taking in as many calories, but they were doing it in a different way. And the body was ramping up its metabolic rate because it was accessing all the stored fat. And I think if most people understood, unless you're incredibly lean with a very, very low body fat percentage, you still have tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calories of fat available on the body that it can use. And when it finds it and uses it, it doesn't need to slow down the metabolic rate. It can actually speed up. So that kind of explains why on the fifth day of a particular fast, you feel better than you did earlier in the fast. To most people, that wouldn't make any sense at all until you understand kind of the mechanism, how the metabolism works that way.
Yeah, and I was surprised to see that even on my fifth day of dry fasting, my urination frequency was still about the same. Every day it was the same. I have my particular times throughout the day, like when I first wake up, a couple hours later. My frequency never changed. Now the volume did. The volume went down, and the color darkened too, obviously. But I was surprised to see even on the fifth day, I'm waking up and I'm like peeing a full stream, like where I don't know where this is coming from. But you know, if you look into the science of it, your body's breaking down fat and it's creating its own metabolic water. It's amazing what the body can do.
It's amazing what the body can do. That's so well said. Once you understand kind of autophagy and the way the body just knows how to recycle materials and rebuild things and repair faster, like you mentioned, I think it's so critical. It's one of my favorite practices for that kind of thing, as far as like a reset, like you were describing. So that's fantastic. Tell us how movement and exercise kind of fits into your plan as far as feeling optimal.
So for me, exercise and movement, body movement, I have my tenets in life and I put the sunshine and the body movement together. It's been a key part of my life since I'm a little kid. Now, I don't know how you were growing up, but me and all my friends, we grew up on our bikes and playing manhunt. And we were always active and we were always playing wiffle ball on the court and playing football and basketball. And I've been into exercise my entire life. But throughout my like early adulthood, like 20s and 30s, I exercised because it did provide some relief. It made me feel better. And that's what I liked about it. And so I continued to do it. And then like at some point, I started to question like what are my goals in the gym? Why am I even working out? And then this is when I discovered Jim Wendler and his 531 program. And he convinced me that I got a goal now. I want to get strong. So I started powerlifting in my 30s or so. And it became a huge part of my life. And it was for me, I'm the type of person that I love to track. I had an aspiration to be a personal trainer, but because of my bipolar and the depression, I really couldn't get out of my own way. But I was practicing with friends and coworkers, and I was doing really well. I had the acronym, I had the business plan, I had everything laid out. I was going to do this thing, and I was going to be involved with food tracking because I love that stuff. I absolutely love it. I love designing workout programs. I do it for my wife. I still have some friends that I do it for. I do it for myself. Like right now, I have my next like couple of months of 531 planned out. I know exactly what I'm doing. So for me, it's an accountability factor. It's one of my passions. So it's something I love, which keeps me engaged. Um, it's just one of the many things I do. So I started sprinting almost 2 years ago now from Dr. Sean O'Mara. You ever had him on?
Yeah, of course, he's amazing. Him and his
Ever had him on?
counterpart as well, Claudia Rosa from Brazil,
Yeah.
who also
Uh-huh.
talks about like visceral
Yeah.
fat and sprinting and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I started sprinting because of him. So now I have this whole other story because this other thing we could talk about with my cramping, but um dealing with chronic cramps since I had COVID in 21. But for a while, sprinting was the only thing I did. I would play around with some dumbbells and kettlebells, but nothing formal. But sprinting was my main workout for like a year and a half. And now I've started to figure out a way to resolve my cramping. And I've added the weightlifting back in, which has been a godsend because I forgot how much I loved it. I had, I've just like have this love affair with the barbell. You know, I did heavy barbell weightlifting for a long time. And I didn't realize how much I missed it. It's been great. So I call it body movement because that could be as simple as walking. Right now I'm standing up. I'm at a standing desk. This was something I transitioned to in the fall just to reduce my sitting time, and I consider this body movement as well. I'm just not sitting around. You know, I love to walk. Part of my challenge that I'm doing with my friends for this New Year's is making sure I get a dedicated walk in every day, and I don't just mean like when my daughter and I went shopping the other day, we had to walk to and from the car and around the store. That doesn't count. It's got to be a walk for the purpose of going for a walk. Um, I love walking. I absolutely love it, especially after eating. And there's science there to show that it will lower your blood sugar. Now, I've had times where I'm wearing a CGM and I see that. And back in the day when I was testing my blood all day long, I still test it once a day, but when I was testing my blood glucose, I would go for a walk and my glucose would definitely come down. I think it helps my digestion as well. And I love doing mobility exercises and foam rolling and all that kind of stuff. So that's all part of the body movement for me. And right now, what I'm doing is Mondays and Fridays, I'm lifting weights. Wednesdays, I'm sprinting. Today's Wednesday. When we get off, I'm going to go outside on the bike path. I'm going to be barefoot sprinting on the bike path. It's crushed stone. And then I'm going to eat my food. And all of it put together. We talked about fasting. We're talking about the body movement. There's sunshine in there too. I try to get as much sunshine as possible. It's all of these things, and there's more we can get into if you want, but all of these things together are helping me get to that optimal place I'm looking for.
Yeah, I love that. What a cool plan, that Monday, Wednesday, Friday kind of plan for the more intense exercise. If you were to ask me what are the two most helpful movements that most people could do, I would say the exact same thing that you did. I want people to walk as much as they can. I think there's almost a nearly linear benefit to walking more versus walking less, as long as you're not overdoing it. I think it's really important to consider footwear. Either, do as much walking as you can barefoot, or find some minimal footwear that allows your foot to strike the ground properly and yourself to embrace. You think about the sprinting on that hard surface, most people would think like, oh, you're definitely going to get injured doing that. And it's like, no, you can guarantee that your form is going to be perfect when you do that, because you have to soften yourself. You will literally hurt yourself if you try to run in an improper way when you're barefoot or wearing minimal shoes. So I think that's wonderful. And I think the light also fits in with all of that. What do you notice when you're getting lots of like sunrises, sunsets? You're kind of setting your circadian rhythm with that. Or tell us about like the importance of getting light, and also the importance of getting sunlight directly through the eyes and not through using things like sunglasses where possible.
Right. Before we get into the sunlight, I want to go back to sprinting for a second, because what you said about having proper form, there's a great example of that when I was teaching my wife to sprint, and she's wearing regular sneakers, regular running shoes with a big heel on them. And I'm like, I don't understand why you can't get the form down. Like, here's what we're going to do. You need to come outside barefoot. She didn't want to do that. So she put socks on. It's like, if you look at anybody running barefoot, you're going to run on the balls of your feet where you belong. She couldn't figure that out with her sneakers on. And it wasn't until I got her in socks that she was able to get her form down. Then now she's wearing barefoot shoes. I started wearing barefoot shoes a couple years ago, and I'm fully barefoot now. I'm the freak that's walking around my neighborhood when it's 19 degrees out in the snow or whatever. I'm
Good.
barefoot.
Me too. I'm glad
My
I'm not alone.
mom is mortified, and people think I'm like I'm nuts. They call me a caveman. I'm eating raw meat and I'm
The
walking around.
homeless guy.
And for the people that are worried about it, yes, I wash my feet frequently. If I go for a barefoot walk, I am washing my feet as soon as I come in the door. I wash my feet all throughout the day, just so people know.
Oh, that's great. It's so funny. Like, I can be at a park and watch people run, and I could see somebody in the distance just by watching their upper body. I can tell whether they're running barefoot or not without even looking at their feet, looking at their footwear. Like the way the mechanics work, a proper running when you're wearing the correct footwear or not wearing any footwear at all. It just instantly corrects that form, like we said. And I notice it, way off in the distance, even in somebody's upper body. So really cool that you do that. And yeah, I feel like getting that sunlight, the direct light, both on our skin and our eyes, is just so critical for really setting the rhythm of our day. I certainly notice that the more sunlight I get during the day, the better my sleep is at night. The more I get my room, dark and cold after getting lots of sunlight during the day, it just seems like you have such a difference in energy throughout the day, and much better sleep.
Yeah. So what I've noticed is that in the past, I would crave sunshine really hard. And there would be a joke. My wife would joke like, the sun's going down. Is the sun calling you today? Because I would say, the sun's calling me. I gotta go. We have a lake not far from the house, and I would go there for sunset. And what I notice is the more sunlight I get, that craving goes away. I don't have that anymore. So something cool that I experienced was last January, I finally broke down and started to meditate. This is one of my other modalities that I do. And in doing that, I was trying to get peace and quiet, and so I was going in my back porch. It's a small little foyer. It's like 5 by 5. But I discovered that even in January, when it's 35 degrees out, it can be 80 in there. It could be, sometimes I have a thermometer. It can be like 105 degrees in that porch, and the
Wow.
sun's coming in. So I had no idea. I've been living in this house for a long time. I had no idea. So I've been doing that. I do that as much as possible. If I'm like, I might take a 15-minute break from work, and it's 105 degrees in that porch. I'm in there with shorts on, no shirt, and I'm sunbathing. And I don't know if you can tell on this camera, but I'm pretty tan for me for this time of year. I'm pretty tan. I discovered this last winter, and in March, people were asking me like, "Hey, did you guys go on vacation? Like, you look so tan. What are you doing?" I'm just hanging out on my porch. So I have a side porch, which is a bigger. It used to be like a sun, I guess a sun porch, but it's closed in. And that porch too, in the afternoon, there's a window of time where it'll be like 85, 90 degrees. And it's like one of the things I do is if like I'm preparing to host somebody and I'm listening to one of their podcasts, I go sit in the porch for 20 minutes and listen to it there. Or like folding my laundry, like any kind of mundane task. I'll bring my laundry in there and I'll fold my laundry in the sun for like 20 minutes. And it's hard for me to say like I notice this when I do the sun, because I'm doing all this stuff together, right? One of the things I have noticed is that I got a red light this year. I got a cheapy red light off of Amazon because I don't have the money to buy an expensive light box. And what I try to do is I'm trying to simulate the sunrise, because I'm a dad, I got a kid, and we're getting up, we're getting ready for school. Most of the weekdays, I'm signed into work already in the morning when the sun is rising. So I can't go to the sunrise every day. I can do it on the weekends. And the days that I do it, I just feel happy and calm. And in my story, I'll tell you that if I'm not doing this stuff, I'm angry and irritable. But when I do this stuff, I'm happy and I'm calm. And that's what I'm looking for. And the best days for me are when I can get the sunrise and the sunset in the same day. And that's part of the reason that my birthday recently was so special, is because my family, I mean, I went and did the sunrise on my own, but we drove a little bit further than we normally would. We got the sunset in, and it's just an extra special thing for me. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to simulate the sunrise. I have this red light. I also have a white light box. I have the light box off to my side. I put that on. I have the red light in my face. And what they'll tell you about the red light is you're supposed to wear dark glasses. You're not supposed to look right in it. It came with these dark green glasses, but I'm not looking at it. I'm closing my eyes. And I've combined this with my meditation and my breath work. I'm doing the Wim Hof breath holds. That's another thing that I started last year that I kind of fell off and been off and on, but I've rededicated myself to it. So I go downstairs in the basement in the morning, put the red light on its lowest setting. I start my meditation timer. I have a mantra I'm going through. I go through the mantra. I get myself settled. Then I start my Wim Hof breathing. And as I'm doing my rounds, I'm turning up the intensity on that red light. I have my eyes closed. And it is literally just like as if I'm in my back porch or I'm outside. If you're outside and you close your eyes and you look up at the sun, you're going to see that bright red light. So I'm doing that with this red light and I'm intensifying it over like 15 or 20 minutes, trying to simulate the sunrise. And I've been doing this since it was in the middle of that fast, my 7-day fast that I started. And I have days where I wake up and I'm just like, I don't know, I'm a little bit tired. I don't feel like, do I really want to do this meditation thing? Like, all right, I'm dedicated to it. I got to do it. I go downstairs and 15 minutes later and I feel great. It's like that feeling didn't even happen. And I've been referring to it as like my cup of coffee. I don't drink coffee, but this is where coffee comes into play for a lot of people because it helps you wake up and start your day and get alert. And that's what this does for me. And the days that I can get out and actually see the sunrise is even more powerful. I can drive to the bay, which is not far from here. I could take a walk on a path along the bay, and then I sit and I meditate as the sun comes up. And I feel happy and calm. I feel energized. And I'm just ready to start my day. I'm ready to tackle whatever life is going to throw at me that day.
Yeah. The thing I respect the most about you and your journey and everything you've shared with us today is how pragmatic everything is. You've alluded to the fact that you might not be the best one to explain the science, which I would absolutely disagree with because you have been explaining the science this whole time and done a very good job doing it. But also, you're doing these things because they're benefiting you and you're noticing that benefit and it changes the way you show up and for your own motives. Having a healthy life, being there for your daughter, enjoying time with your wife, like you know what you want, and all you're doing is experimenting to find what gets you there. And so somebody might listen to this conversation and think like, oh boy, I could never eat raw meat. I could never do all this red light stuff or get this much walking in, all these things we're talking about. But really, when you think about it, for the people that it makes a difference and is worth the change, it's really small sacrifice to change these things slowly over time. They become habits, they enhance your life, they make everything better. So I love the way that you've approached that. This conversation is absolutely thrown by. It's been over an hour that we've been talking now, which has been super enjoyable. I really
Wow.
enjoy the time I get to spend with you. And yeah, it's been really interesting to get to know you a little bit better and know your personal story and everything that comes along with the carnivore diet and how you were able to, just heal so much suffering in your life. But for now, Stephen T, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
All right, so I recently changed a bunch of my handles on socials. I was MT4MH, but it's now Stephen Trunts. So if you're looking to go to Facebook or Instagram or X is where I'm most active, you can find me at Stephen Trunts. My handle is MT4MH. The name is Find Your Keto. And I have the HFBO Facebook group. If you're high fat or you're looking to get high fat, and like I said, I don't care where your fat's coming from. I don't care if you're carnivore, vegan. I don't care what it is. It's a welcoming group. There's no politics. No one's gonna say, well, you can't eat pepper and you can't have this. And no one in that group is gonna say that. It's an awesome group of people. If you want to come in and you're saying, hey, I'd like to try high fat soon, and I need to get off this diet soda I'm drinking, we're gonna be in there helping you. I also
I
have
love that.
You mentioned the X group, the keto for mental health, keto therapy for mental health X group that I have on Twitter. I keep calling it Twitter, but I'm gonna call it Twitter forever.
Let's just keep calling it Twitter.
Yeah,
That's fine with me.
yeah.
I do the
So
same thing.
there's that group. But I'm very active on X. That's where I've been most active since I started, and I'm pretty active on Facebook because of that group. So that's where you can find me.
Excellent. We'll be sure to link to all of that in the notes. And
Right.
yeah, Stephen, this has been an awesome conversation. I really love your journey and how pragmatic you've been making everything, and the motives that you have again are so awesome. I think a lot of people get so much out of this conversation. But for now, thank you so very much for taking the time to be on our show today. We really, really appreciate you.
Oh, thank you for having me. Is it a good time to tell people that I'm going to be hosting you next week? So
Oh man, this is a great time. I can't wait.
we can continue our conversation. Like I feel like I have all these notes in front of me. I didn't even get to half the stuff I wanted to talk about, so it always happens.
Oh man. Well, good. We'll have to have you back on then. How's that?
Perfect. Yeah, let's do it.
Beautiful.
Thank you
That's
so much for
awesome.
having me, Casey.
Yeah, it was such an honor to host you, my friend.
Thank
And
you.
this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.